task.
Do you think it was a deliberate, that everyone has agreed that the law is not a bad law, that they have followed international examples, and we're looking at the context that there is a backlog of cases in the legal system. There needs to be something done. How do we get out of this conundrum? If we're saying that the law is not a bad law, but yet we are crucifying the Attorney General and the Minister of Justice for this?
There are two aspects of it. One is that it is clear that the Section 34, as was amended by the Senate and so on, that there was a flaw in that Section 34 because it meant that particular crimes, once they had been committed 10 years ago, could not be tried in the courts. And there was no judicial discretion in those matters. And the Schedule 6 did not, because it did not include certain crimes, exempt certain crimes from that 10-year cutoff period, enabled or would enable some people to go free. So there was a flaw in the Section 34. The rest of the law is good. So it meant simply fixing either Section 34 or the Schedule 6 and so on. But that's one part of it. But the crisis was triggered, and we have to keep coming back to that, by the proclamation of one section, Section 34. The question is, which has not been answered by the government, why was that Section 34 singled out for immediate proclamation, when everybody has said, the DPP has said he was not consulted, the CG has said he was not consulted, the judicial system was not in place. Parliament was given an undertaking that everything had to be put in place first before that Section 34 was proclaimed.
So
and it is that we have to focus on.
I'm sitting here listening to you, and we also spoke to Faris Al-Wari this morning. The fact that this is now all coming out. Everyone is insinuating that there may have been some sinister motive behind this, some connections which we all cannot see. What does it say about the quality of politicians, the quality of the men and women that hold office? We also have a number of other pieces of legislation, the FIU investigating political links, investigating money laundering. There was a seminar over the weekend, $500 million worth of dirty monies in this system. If we're looking at this and seeing a link in all of these activities, how can we trust the system? How can we trust politicians?
Key question, and the point of trust. The President spoke about that yesterday, as did the CJ. And that was the same point that I made in the debate on the same issue in November, that when there's a breakdown of trust in the system, the whole society will fall apart. We will implode. And that is the risk in which we're in. And you're right. And this is why we are saying that if the government does not, if ministers do not account for their actions on matters like this, that other actions...
But they went to Parliament and they saying that they reverted the decision and that they have corrected it.
Yes, but does that mean that somebody did not... Deliberately err? Now, you know, when MSA broke, one of the issues was that of corruption and governance. That was the fundamental issue, was governance. One aspect of the governance crisis was that of corruption. And it was a matter that I explicitly raised in the meetings with the political leaders, the issue of corruption. And I could get no satisfactory response from the Prime Minister or the other ministers that corruption would be dealt with in a serious way, except to say that, well, if evidence emerged, which is the old Panda's type thing,
right,
bring the evidence and so on. But I said that there's far too much smoke right now for there not to be some fire. And it is my sense that there's likely to be, given what you just said about, the newspaper, the report on Sunday and so on, there's likely to be, one or more than one major scandal emerging.
No, this also comes back to bring the evidence. If everyone is aware of all of the wrongdoing, no one has been crucified, no one has been taken before the courts of Trinidad and Tobago, and this is from successive administrations. The PNM was put out of office on a platform of corruption and crime. Are you saying that this government is no different?
I think that is correct, yes. It is no different. And, the problem with white-collar crimes like these is that neither the bribe giver nor the bribe taker is going to come forward, because both are equally guilty. But there is far too much smoke. When I say smoke, there are far too many people saying and reports coming out that there are issues. Minister Volley made a statement. He was carried in The Guardian on Friday, I think it was, when he said that, he's not a money in bag minister.
Yes, I saw it.
No, and he said he's been hearing the stories too. Now, what does that say? I mean, that he's speaking, has to be speaking about fellow cabinet members, that he's been hearing stories about fellow cabinet members, but he's not one of them. Now, what does that say? You know, from right within the cabinet, that those statements are being made. And so, if we have a system that is systemically in terms of the nature of the constitutional
and who's going to
arrangements,
change it?
Well, first of all, we need to have people who are prepared as citizens who say that this is not the kind of Trinidad and Tobago we want. We have to have civil society organizations, trade unions and so on, who have to say this is not the society we want. And we also have to have a political party that says this is not the kind of society we want, which is why MSJ broke from the government, because we said we could not be part of that mess.
David, if at the MSJ, now obviously you did not initiate a mobilization campaign, but the presence will be on the streets today supporting the position taken. And I'm going to make sure and keep re-emphasizing that point. But if it is today, it's only members of the PNM, only a few members of the MSJ. What does it tell you about we as a people after 50 years in this country? Maybe corruption is part of our culture. Maybe we are a people that expect politicians to be corrupt, that expect decisions to never be made in the best interests of this country.
That may be true, but I think what it will also say, and hopefully Dr. Rowley and the PNM will understand it, is that the way in which they went about this thing was very wrong. And that what MSJ is going to do in terms of moving the issues forward is to work towards a broader coalition, which is non-partisan.
But that coalition was the partnership. The partnership brought together every single entity.
Yes. I'm talking about a non-partisan one. I'm talking now about civil society organizations and so on. That is what we require now at this moment. That, as we had with the People's Democracy in 2009, that is what we require, and that is what we're going to work towards.
But I'm going to bring it back to the point, David. I know we are running out of time, but a number of civil society leaders are now holding key positions within this government, and yet they have been unable to initiate any level of change. Maybe we are a food society where people are not going to make tough decisions and hold those accountable.
I think there are a lot of people in this country who do not wish that to be. And I think that is why MSJ, for example, with our petition campaign, because we also have a petition campaign, it's online and so on, and we also have hard copies. A lot of people, as we do our walkabouts, are saying to us, we're supporting the MSJ, we're supporting the position you've taken on good governance against what is taking place in the country right now, and for fundamental and serious change.
David, we just have a minute till we wrap this interview. Your closing comments to Trinidad and Tobago.
The country, we need to bring about fundamental change. The traditional parties, quite frankly, are not prepared to do that, are not capable of doing that. And that includes the PNM as well, because they're part of the old culture of politics in this country. But citizens do need to take a stand on important issues affecting governance. And, you know, the MSJ, that is what we are about.
Take a stand on important issues affecting governance. What is your position as a citizen of this country? You are a shareholder. You have a stake in this country and its future. Are you confident that those, and I mean those, the entire system of government and the governance structures are really governing this country in a way that you are satisfied? And if you're not, do something about it. I'm Amy Ram. Soon to take a very short break. When we come back, we'll continue to keep you updated with all that's happening in the country. Welcome back, Trinidad and Tobago. Libyan authorities have identified 50 people who were involved in the attack on the U.S. consulate, in which the ambassador and 3 other Americans were killed. That is according to an international report. 2 U.S. destroyers have been deployed to Libyan coast, and Barack Obama dispatched a unit of Marines trained in counterterrorism operations in that country. The U.S. Secretary of State Hillary Clinton has denounced the film titled Innocence of Muslims as disgusting and reprehensible, saying that there is division. YouTube has not pulled the clip down, despite appeals by the U.S. administration. That is, President Barack Obama has asked the president of Google to kindly remove the clip. International freedom of information, it's always a balance. Shiraz Ali, who's attached to the Darul Uloom and the Imam at the Nur-e-Islam Masjid that is in El Socorro, is joining us this morning. Mr. Ali, good morning. Thank you for joining us.
Good morning. Thank you.
A film titled Innocence of Muslims. What exactly are your thoughts on all that has been happening?
Well, it's a very unfortunate event. It's a film which portrays the Prophet Muhammad, who's the final messenger of Allah and our Prophet, as someone who's a pedophile and a person who is a homosexual and so on. Of course, from our knowledge and of the Prophet Muhammad, because the information about his life is known from birth to death, he was none of these. So it really seems as though it was an attempt to incense Muslims and create this kind of division and disharmony that is going on around the world.
Incense Muslims. Now, there seems to be a sweeping wave of violence throughout several parts of the world. We're starting in Libya. Also, I'm seeing reports of German, British, and American embassies in several parts of North and Southeast, in several parts of North Africa and Southeast Asia. The authorities have heightened the alert system, even in our local U.S. embassy.
There were about 20 countries that there were protests, and they were mostly aimed at the United States embassies because the film emanated from the United States. But it has to be recognized that the reason why these protests occur was because the Prophet Muhammad is not just a messenger, someone who brought a message for Muslims, but he was someone who we emulate, someone who we are told that we should praise. We send praise to him, we ask Allah to bless him, and we respect him, we love him. And therefore it was an emotional response that occurred in these countries with regard to the releasing of this video. So, and as well, you said that they were violent protests, but really, a lot of the protests, I think, were peaceful, but because the security forces of the country didn't know how to deal with it, it ended up being violent because they were pushing back those who were protesting and so on. And then, of course, it became squabbles, and eventually it became violent.
Now, it is unclear as to how much of the, I'm quoting from a UK Guardian report, it is unclear as to how much of the violence was spontaneous and to what extent it has been orchestrated. The film involved was apparently made last year by a Coptic Christian living in LA, using actors who said they had no idea they were making an anti-Islam film. The offensive language about the Prophet Muhammad was basically put in later. The 14-minute clip of the film appeared on YouTube in July, but only began to generate widespread anger when it was promoted by radical Christians in the US and then broadcast in Egypt by Islamic activists. How is this going to end?
Well, how is it going to end? Most likely we're hoping that this is going to peter out and it's going to be in the annals of history as another event where someone has tried to desecrate the name of the Messenger of Allah, desecrate Islam in some way. And there has been a response, and of course in the East the response is very emotional because of the love that they have for their Messenger. Remember that these are also countries where there are a majority of Muslims, there are millions of Muslims, unlike the response you're seeing here in Trinidad or in Guyana or in Suriname, and so on, where we're minorities and we live a different kind of life. Hopefully it's going to end, but it's going to go down in history as another event, and hopefully there will not be another event, but if there is, it's going to be just like this or even worse.